Next ball game, little Sunday action. I'm talking about the Raiders squaring off against the Titans. And once again, that is a 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff on Sunday. Now, Las Vegas is minus 2.5, totals 46 and a hook. And even though the Raiders are 0-2 to start the year, they are having some success moving the football. Derek Carr's thrown for nearly 550 yards and 4 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Devontae Adams and Darren Waller, they've combined for nearly 300 receiving yards between the two of them. Now they're facing a Tennessee defense on the other side who's having a tough time slowing anybody down. They're allowing over 400 yards a game, and they're currently in the bottom 3 in points allowed. And aside from losing their opening 2 contests this season, they failed to cover the number in both of those games. Now, offensively, things have been equally as awry for the Titans. They're averaging just 13 points a game right now, and they're averaging under 275 yards a game of total offense. Now, injury-wise, Lawan, Dupree, Cannon, Jones, Adeniyi, Hilliard, and Fulton, they are all listed as questionable. Meanwhile, for Las Vegas on the other side, Bolden, Perryman, Nichols, Renfro, James, and Morig, they're listed as questionable for them. Now, when it comes to the total, I do think this one can get over the number. Plus, both of these teams saw their Week 2 contests get over the total respectively. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Las Vegas minus 2.5 over 46 and a hook. Next ball game, it is going to be Saints taking on the Panthers, 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff on Sunday. New Orleans is minus 3, totals 40.5. Now, we saw a pretty good two-way action on the total on this one. Half a point move toward New Orleans in the early wagering. Now, I do think the Saints are going to have problems moving the football Sunday. Jameis Winston, he already has thrown 3 picks, and the Saints lost a fumble as well. Now, defensively, New Orleans has actually had a tough time slowing down the run this year. That's typically their forte. They normally have the best rush defense in the league. Well, not this year through 2 games. They're in the bottom 10 right now in rush defense. Now, they're taking on a Carolina team who plays some pretty tough defense themselves. These guys are allowing only 150 yards a game through the air. They're also in the top 10 in total yards allowed. Xavier Woods has 20 tackles along with a PBU. Meanwhile, Frankie Louvieux and Shaq Thompson, they have over 30 tackles between the two of them. When it comes to head-to-head meetings between these two organizations, as much as the Saints have owned the Panthers, well, Carolina covered the number in 6 out of their last 10 contests with each other. Now, injury-wise, Jackson and Roy are questionable for Carolina. Meanwhile, for the Saints, Kamara, Smith, and Adebo are questionable for them. When it comes to the number, we're seeing some pretty tough defense on both teams. Both squads also saw their Week 2 matchups all fall under the total. I'm going to lean toward Carolina plus 3, under 40.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Lions taking on the Vikings, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Minnesota's minus 5.5, totals 53 and a hook. Now we saw a half a point move toward Detroit and a 2-point move upward on the total. Minnesota opened 6 down to 5.5. Total open 51.5 up to 53 and a hook. And even though this Minnesota defense got blasted on Monday Night Football, it's actually the offense that I'm worried about. These guys are in the bottom 10 in scoring, and they're rushing for under 95 yards a game. That can't happen. When you have a running back as good as Dalvin Cook, you got to be able to run the football successfully. You got to try. You got to make it happen. He's too good of a talent to not be running the ball well. Now, Kirk Cousins, he's also got himself 3 interceptions already, and he's been sacked 3 times. And if Justin Jefferson continues to be keyed on, well, just keep in mind that Minnesota's second leading receiver, Adam Thielen, he doesn't even have 90 yards on the season yet. This offense looking a bit one-dimensional right now. Now, they're also facing a Detroit defense who actually likes to get pressure on the quarterback. These guys have 6 sacks already, and they're led by rookie Aiden Hutchinson, who has 3 of them. When it comes to offensive production, make no mistake, The Lions can certainly move the sticks. These guys are in the top 5 in total yards per game. They're led by DeAndre Swift, who's rushed for 200 yards already. Now, injury-wise, Ragnall Jackson and Melifonwu, they are questionable for Detroit. Meanwhile, for Minnesota, Smith and Booth are questionable for them. When it comes to the total in this one, I think this should end up being a fun one to watch. The Vikings are averaging 27 points a game in their last 10 meetings with Detroit. Meanwhile, the Lions, they are 2-0 to the over this season themselves. I think we should see a good amount of scoring. I think Detroit should be able to keep this one close. Give me the Lions plus 5.5, over 53 and a hook. Next ball game, everybody's going to have their eyes on this one. I'm talking about the Bills at the Dolphins, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Buffalo's minus 5.5 on the road, totals 54. And even though these offenses are selling tickets, it's the Bills' defense who definitely has the edge in this one. They're holding their opponents under 150 yards a game passing. They also have the number 1 rush defense in the league. And just keep in mind, guys, they played the Rams and the Titans to acquire those accolades. No slouch. I mean, the Titans, all they do is run the ball. Derrick Henry, LA Rams, Super Bowl champs. One of the best offenses in the league. So, Bills are looking awful dangerous right now. Now, Taron Jackson and Tremaine Edmonds, they have nearly 30 tackles between the two of them. Meanwhile, Matt Milano has a pair of interceptions from that linebacker position. And, of course, offensively, no real surprise here. The Bills lead the league in scoring. Josh Allen's completing over 75% of his passes. He's averaging well over 300 yards a game. Meanwhile, Stephon Diggs, he has 270 receiving yards and 2 scores. Now, they're facing a Miami defense on the other side who's a bit shaky, in my opinion. I know they've looked good in certain spots, but they are allowing 23 points a game officially, and they're actually in the bottom 10 in pass defense. Now, in these teams' last 10 head-to-head meetings, the Dolphins covered the number just 3 times, just 30% of the time. Now, injury-wise, Carter, Wilson, Long, and Tyndall, they are all questionable for the Dolphins. Meanwhile, for Buffalo, Settle, Oliver, Sweeney, Davis, Doyle, and Spector, they're questionable for them. When it comes to the total, both teams saw their Week 2 contest get over the line. They also saw overs in 6 out of their last 10 head-to-head meetings with each other. I'm going to lean toward Buffalo, minus 5.5 on the road, over 54. Next ball game, it is going to be Chiefs taking on the Colts, 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Kansas City's minus 6.5, totals 50. Now the 2-0 Chiefs continue to present the most consistent product in football. I mean, this has been consistently good over many seasons. They're averaging 36 points a game already, and they find themselves in the top 5 in total yards. They do that every year. Patrick Mahomes, he's completing 73% of his passes for just about 300 yards a game. He's also thrown 7 touchdowns and 0 picks. They're taking on an Indy squad on the other side who just can't convert their drives into points. These guys are dead last in scoring per contest. They're also losing the quarterback matchup in this one. Matty against Patty. Matty loses. I mean, he's just not as good. He's thrown just 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. And he's been sacked 7 times through 2 games. Now, you want to blame that on the O-line, but I think a good amount of that also has to do with his lack of mobility, his age. Now, injury-wise, Leonard, Pittman, and Pierce, they're all questionable for Indy. Meanwhile, for Kansas City, Bucker, Watson, and Hardman are out. When it comes, are they out? No, they're not out. They're questionable. Bucker, Watson, and Hardman are questionable. Now, total-wise, KC saw their Week 2 contest fall under the number. Meanwhile, the Colts are 2-0 to the under to start the year. I'm going to lean toward Kansas City, minus 6.5, under 50. Next matchup, Bengals, Jets, 1 o'clock East. Cincinnati's minus 4.5, totals 55. Now, the 0-2 Bengals continue to have some serious problems with their O-line. They've allowed Joe Burrow to be sacked 13 times already. And because he's been rushed, well, Joe Cool's been making some pretty bad decisions. He's thrown 4 interceptions already. Now they're taking on a Jets defense who's led by C.J. Mosley and Jordan Whitehead. They've got 30 tackles between the two of them. Meanwhile, offensively, these guys have had little issue moving the ball down the field. Believe it or not, Joe Flacco's throwing for over 300 yards a game, along with 5 touchdowns. Most important, guys, the Jets have turned it over only once this year. Now, when it comes to covering the point spread, New York has gone 7-3 against the number in their last 10 meetings with Cincinnati. And when it comes to the injury report, Uzomah and Williams are questionable for the Jets. Wilson's still out with that knee. Meanwhile, for the Bengals on the other side, Sample's questionable with an elbow injury. When it comes to the total, the Bengals are 2-0 to the under to start the year. Meanwhile, the Jets saw their Week 1 opener fall a dozen points below the posted total. I'm going to lean toward the Jets plus 4.5, under 45. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Eagles taking on the Commanders, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Philadelphia is minus 6.5, totals 47. Now, we are seeing big movement toward the Eagles and the under in this one. Philly opened 5 up to 6.5. Total opened 49.5 down to 47. When it comes to moving the football, well, no one's doing it better than the Birds. These guys are leading the league in yards per contest. And even though all the focus is on the passing game, well, the Eagles continue to run the ball effectively. They're in the top 3 in rush yards per game. Now, obviously, Jalen Hurts, he does have a lot to do with that. As a matter of fact, he's got over 700 total yards from passing and running. And of course, his favorite target's been A.J. Brown, who's averaging over 100 yards a game. Now, Philadelphia is going up against a Washington defense who's been really poor through 2 weeks. These guys allowed 22 points to Jacksonville in the opener, and they allowed 36 points to Detroit a few days ago. Now, they also have one of the worst rush defenses in the game. That could present problems, considering Philly just runs it for 1 million yards a game. But anyway, Washington's in the bottom 5 right now in rush defense. And when it comes to consistency at the quarterback position, they're never going to get it with Carson Wentz. You're either going to get really, really good or really, really bad, but it's always going to be very risky and very I don't know what to say. It makes your heart pound. Like, it makes you nervous. That's what this guy brings to the table. Nerve-wracking. That's what I tried to say. But anyway, Wentz has thrown 3 interceptions already, and he's been sacked 6 times. He tries to do too much. Never just eats a play. He always has to, turn it into a scoring play when there's trouble. But anyway, injury-wise, Schweitzer, Wise, Curl, Tuhill, and Turner, they're all questionable for the Commanders. When it comes to the total, Washington's 2-0 to the over to start the year. They're also allowing nearly 27 points a game in their last 10 meetings with the Eagles. Meanwhile, Philadelphia saw their opener against Detroit get 19 points above the total. I'm going to lean toward Philadelphia, minus 6.5, over 47. Next matchup, it is going to be Ravens at the Patriots, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Baltimore's minus 3, totals 43.5. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of this Baltimore defense right now. They're dead last in total yards allowed per contest, and they're also giving up over 375 yards a game through the air. They're going to have to face the duo of Jacoby Myers and Nelson Aguilar, who combined for nearly 300 yards receiving already. Meanwhile, the strength of this Patriots organization is their defense. It normally is. These guys are in the top 5 in fewest yards allowed. We're also limiting their competition to under 80 yards a game rushing. Miles Bryant and Jawan Bentley, they've got nearly 25 tackles combined. And when it comes to the injury report, Duggar and Bledsoe are questionable for the Pats. Meanwhile, for Baltimore, Stanley, Dobbins, Duvernay, Stevens, and Jones, they are questionable for them. When it comes to the total, Baltimore saw their season opener against the Jets fall a dozen points under the number. Meanwhile, New England's 2-0 to the under for the whole year. I'm going to lean toward New England plus 3, under 43.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Texans taking on the Bears, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Chicago's -3, totals 40.5. Now, we did see a 1.5 point move upward on the total in this one. And even though Chicago's defense, their defensive stats look a lot better than Houston's, just keep in mind that Chicago's Week 1 contest with San Francisco was in a monsoon. So the offenses really weren't doing a whole bunch. And, of course, not a whole lot of passing in that one. Now, Chicago's taking on a Houston team who's allowing just 18 points a game themselves. And they covered the point spread 2 times already this year. Jonathan Owens and Kamu Grugier-Hill, they have over 45 tackles already combined. Meanwhile, Jerry Hughes has a pair of sacks, an interception, and a forced fumble. When it comes to the injury report in this one, Britt and Pierre-Louis, they are questionable for Houston. Meanwhile, for the Bears, Cruikshank and Jones, they are questionable for them. Scoring-wise, both squads are 2-0 to the under to start the season. And even if Chicago's Week 1 contest wasn't a monsoon, well, I still think it would have stayed under. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Houston +3, under 40.5. Next matchup, Jags-Chargers, 4:05 East. The LA Chargers are -7, totals 48. Now, I am a bit, concerned about the Chargers' reliance on Justin Herbert. They've been unable to establish a run game in the first 2 weeks here. They're in the bottom 5 in rush offense, and their leading ball carrier has only 75 yards through 2 games. And, well, it doesn't look like they're going to start running it well this weekend either. This Jags rush defense, they're amongst the best in the AFC right now. These guys are allowing just 69 yards a game on the ground. They're also in the top 10 in total yards per game. Now, Josh Allen, he has a pair of sacks and 3 TFLs from that linebacker position. Meanwhile, Devin Lloyd and Foy Alukin have over 30 tackles combined. When it comes to offensive production, well, wide receiver Christian Kirk, he's averaging just about 100 yards a game receiving. Now, injury-wise, Jacksonville is looking pretty healthy right now. Meanwhile, for Los Angeles, Allen, Lindsley, Pipkins, Parham, and Justin Herbert, they're all banged up a little bit. Now, when it comes to the total, LA's 2-0 to the under to start the year. Meanwhile, Jacksonville saw their last outing against Indy fall 20 points under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Jacksonville +7, keeping this one close, under 48. Next ball game I have for you, I'm assuming this is the game of the week. Might be the last time these two guys face each other. It is going to be Packers taking on the Buccaneers, 4:25 East. Now, Tampa Bay's -2 at home, totals 41. And even though the Bucs are banged up, they continue to win and cover. They're 2-0 in the season. They allowed just 13 total points in those games. This Bucs defense is in the top 5 in fewest yards allowed per contest. Jamel Dean has a pair of interceptions out of that Tampa Bay secondary. He also has 3 PBUs and 9 tackles. Meanwhile, linebacker Devin White, he has 3 sacks, couple PBUs, and 19 tackles on the season. When it comes to offensive production, well, the Bucs have relied on the run. Leonard Fournette, he's averaging nearly 100 yards a game on the ground. Now, they're taking on a Packer defense on the other side who's had a tough time slowing down the run themselves. These guys are actually giving up over 150 yards a game on the ground. When it comes to these teams' last 10 head-to-head meetings, the Pack has failed to cover in 6 out of those 10 ball games. Now, injury-wise, Bakhtiari, he's still questionable for Green Bay. Very important that he plays if you're a Green Bay backer. Got to keep an eye on him. Meanwhile, for the Bucs, Rudolph, Jones, Hicks, Bernard, Smith, Wells, and McCollum, they are all questionable. Mike Evans, he's out. He's suspended for fighting. When it comes to the total, both teams saw unders in weeks 1 and 2, respectively. 4-0 to the under, and combined records between those two squads. Give me Tampa Bay -2, under 41. Next ball game, Rams, Cardinals, 4:25 East. The LA Rams are -3.5, totals 49 and a hook. Now, I do like the Rams in this spot here. They looked efficient offensively against Atlanta this past week. They also continue to do a nice job getting it to Cooper Kupp. The wideout has nearly 250 yards receiving already and 3 scores. Now they're going up against a shaky Cards defense who's having a tough time slowing down the pass. These guys are allowing over 300 yards a game through the air, and they rank second to last in pass defense. They're also allowing more points per contest than any other team in football right now. Now, Arizona's last 10 meetings with LA have been disastrous. Not only are they allowing over 30 points a game, they lost 9 out of those 10 meetings. When it comes to the injury report, Connor, Isabella, Mullen, and Moore, they're all listed as questionable. Meanwhile, for the Rams, Hill, Jefferson, and Durant, they are questionable for them. When it comes to the scoring, LA saw their Week 2 contest fly 12 points over the total. Meanwhile, Arizona, on the other side, they saw their Week 1 opener against Kansas City get over the line. I'm going to lean toward the Rams, minus 3.5, over 49 and a hook. Next ball game, it is going to be Falcons, Seahawks, 425 East. Seattle's minus 1.5, totals 41. Now we saw a big movement toward Atlanta and the under in this one. Seattle opened 3, down to 1.5. Total opened 43, down to 41. And even though the Seahawks are favored in this one, this is an offense that's not going to put up a lot of points this year. These guys are already throwing for under 180 yards a game. They're also dead last in running the football. And if you think this Seahawk defense is going to keep them in ball games this year, well, just keep in mind, these guys are very susceptible to the run. Just keep that in mind. You might lose games with teams running down your throat. And speaking of running the football, Cordell Patterson and Marcus Mariota, they've combined for just about 250 rushing yards on the ground together for the Falcons. This Atlanta offense, they actually find themselves in the top 10 in rush yards per game. When it comes to scoring points, well, the Falcons are actually averaging 27 points a game this year, much better than they've done over the past few seasons. Now, injury-wise, we do have a handful of guys who are questionable for the Seahawks. Harris, Coleman, Burns, Lewis, and Blunt, they're all listed as questionable for Seattle. When it comes to the number, Seattle has seen 8 out of their last 10 meetings with Atlanta get over the line. So once again, if you're into historical trends, plenty of overs to go around. Meanwhile, the Falcons are 2-0 to the over this season themselves. I'm going to lean toward Atlanta, plus 1.5, over 41. Next ball game, little Sunday night football. I'm talking about the Niners at the Broncos, 8:20 Eastern kickoff in the Mile High City. Now, we did see this line flip already. I used to say in the past, a good old-fashioned flip of the lines. San Francisco, they are now -1, totals 44 and a hook. And we saw a bunch of movement on San Francisco and the over in this one. San Fran opened San Fran opened plus 2.5, now -1. Total open 43, up to 44 and a hook. Now, I really think the Broncos are going to have a tough time moving the football on San Francisco defensively. These guys are number 1 in pass defense right now. They're also allowing fewer total yards per game than any other team in the league. And once again, guys, I realize their Week 1 matchup against Chicago was a monsoon, but I really think San Francisco would have stifled Chicago's offense regardless of weather. Nick Bosa has 3 sacks on the season, along with 9 tackles. Meanwhile, Tala Hufanga and Dre Kinlaw, they've also combined for 30 tackles. Now, when it comes to offensive production, Jimmy G or not, this is a Niner team who's been able to consistently run the football under Kyle Shanahan. They've got a top 5 rush offense right now. When it comes to the injury report, Kittle, Brunskill, and Croft are questionable. Meanwhile, for Denver, Turner, Joel, Judy, Hamler, Surtain, and Miners, they're listed as questionable for them. When it comes to the total, both teams have gone 2-0 to the under to start the season. I'm going to lean towards San Francisco, -1, under 44.5. And with that, guys, we're going to jump into our next and final breakdown for the video. It is going to be Cowboys-Giants Monday Night Football. And, of course, that's going to be an 8:15 Eastern kickoff on Monday, September 26, 2022. The New York Football Giants are -2.5, totals 39.5. As much as I hate to lean toward a backup quarterback on the road, I really do think this Dallas defense has what it takes to keep them in ball games. They're in the top 10 in yards allowed per contest. They're also limiting their competition to just 180 passing yards a game. And of course, that includes back-to-back games against Tom Brady and Joe Burrow. Now, of course, Micah Parsons, he's leading the league in sacks with 4 of them. Meanwhile, Leighton Vander Esch and Donovan Wilson, they've combined for nearly 30 tackles between the two of them. And statistics aside, having just Micah Parsons on the line, at linebacker, on the edge, in the middle, it really does affect the other team's offensive scheme, play calling, and audibles. But anyway, they're taking on a Giants offense who's pretty much no threat throwing the football. These guys are averaging under 160 passing yards per game. Now, this G-Men O-line's also having a tough time protecting Danny Dimes. They've allowed him to be sacked 8 times already this year. And in these teams' last 10 head-to-head meetings, the G-Men have lost 9 times to Dallas. Now, injury-wise, Williams, Jackson, Ojulari, Robinson, Pinnock, Thibodeau, they are all questionable. Meanwhile, for Dallas, Kurse, Gallup, Schultz, and McGovern, they are questionable for them. When it comes to the total, both teams have started off the season 2-0 to the under. I'm going to lean toward Dallas plus 2.5, under 39.5. And with that, guys, now it's time for our quick pick recap. Powered to you by my website at patreon.com/BrockPage, where I'm currently 4-1 with a push in my last 6 NFL tier package bets on my website. I like Pittsburgh plus 5.5, under 38. Give me Las Vegas -2.5, over 46.5. I like Carolina plus 3, under 40.5. Detroit plus 5.5, over 53.5. Buffalo -5.5, over 54. Kansas City -6.5, under 50. New York Jets plus 4.5, under 45. Philadelphia -6.5, over 47. New England plus 3, under 43.5. Houston plus 3, under 40.5. Jacksonville plus 7, under 48. Tampa Bay -2, under 41. LA Rams -3.5, over 49.5. Atlanta plus 1.5, over 41. San Francisco -1, under 44.5 points. And with my next and final free pick for the video, I'm going to lean toward Dallas plus 2.5, under 39.5. Real quick, guys, I got to thank you for all your comments, your likes, your subscribes, your follows. I read all of your comments, and I really don't see anything negative. It's nothing but positive. A lot of guys out there agreeing with most of my picks, and good amount of them cashing. So appreciate your guys' kind words out there. Definitely makes me feel good when I read good stuff. So anyway, guys, that's going to do it for me. Don't forget to check me out on my website. Now, real quick, guys, if you do end up getting a membership here today on patreon.com/BrockPage, just keep in mind you're going to get access to that content every single day all the way until October 1st. I always tell folks in every single video, the earlier in the month you sign up, the better. And guys, if you get a package on my site, say if you sign up for the NFL package, you're actually going to get all the cheaper memberships absolutely free. They're going to be included with your purchase. But most importantly, guys, got to thank you for joining me right here on YouTube. Really hope you enjoyed all this great free content, all this great free information. And with that said, guys, happy NFL Week 3 to you. Best of luck to you. And I look forward to seeing you later on today on my website at patreon.com/BrockPage.